Has the market changed its mind about what the Fed may do next?
Chairman Paul Volcker put it at the height of the Great Inflation in 1979.
Welcome back. This is Chris Crystal with Finance Stockholm and discussion about the market. Today is the 21st of September and everybody is on pins and needles. The market is waiting for the rate hikes coming from the US on the Fed side. Powell's speech comes at should be 8 o'clock or 8:30 tonight in Central European time. We'll see what the Fed does. Now, we've already seen what the ECB has done. We here in Sweden, many households will be suffering through the winter because our banking head, Stefan Ingves, he raised basis points, 100 basis points. Yesterday, we talked about that. So we're at 1.75 for our base rate. And we look at a 6-month continuing cycle. Key to his comments were that he could not just sit around and do 75 or do less because the ECB had already gone up 75 basis points. Christine LaGardes' focus has been on the stabilized price controls. With stabilized price controls, the key impacting factor there has been the cost of energy, at least here in Sweden and rest of Europe. And so we see that the components to the inflation, of course, the inflation is already there. We've expanded our money flow by creating more money, and the value of a purchase of your currency has gone down. So that's the inflation, and the consumer price index and the increase in the local prices and your daily consumer goods and the white goods are all going up, and its key component is energy. So that is the focus for us for the next 6 months. But now the question is, in Sweden, where we've had a relatively strong economy, will we continue to have a good economy, or will we see continued contractions? Because we did see a small contraction in the Swedish economy already before the rate hike, and this is tied to the inflation problems. So will a 6-month period be short enough, or will it require a longer period? And what happens? Do we go into a stagflation? Do we go into a recession? There's a number of economists that are from the local banks talking about the rate cycle and talking about the price of the goods and raw materials and the increase there. Some are looking at this as maybe a very short period, and the local mortgage rates have obviously gone up, and we look at a continued cycle there. We'll see in February what the outlook looks like, but we do see more comments coming before then. So when you look at energy, some of the key questions here for us in Sweden would be on our climate goals. Sweden actually has climate goals and stated to be, I believe it's to be neutral, and we have a 60% reduction in carbon emissions by 2045. So the achievability of these targets comes into question, because we have places that are supposed to be built using much, much lower emissions of carbon that will be very hard to achieve. And so the question comes, how much of these ESG goals can be achieved? And I think really there, one of the best economists to look at is Bjorn Lomborg. He's based out of Copenhagen. I think he might even be living in Sweden these days, but or working in Sweden, but he's very often here. He's often talked about the climate disaster, and he's talked about the economic steps to be taken, how to avoid having a societal disaster while still being able to achieve some of the goals of the climate. And it really depends on the scale at which you're building it and the rollout of this new network or technology that you want to use to replace. So we don't need to go into that right now on the reliability or lack of reliability of products, or the very reliable periods of time that you can count on them to work and replace. So you also have the issue in Ukraine coming up today. You've seen Putin come out while we were sleeping. He said he was going to be calling up 300,000 reserve soldiers. He's very committed to regaining the land and having territorial integrity, meaning that the regions that Ukraine may take back from Russia, Russia will take back. Russia is playing a policy of scorched earth right now. They're destroying infrastructure as they leave. And so Ukraine will have to rebuild. That'll add to their Lend-Lease bill that the United States is giving them. So far you're up over 60 billion in aid that's been quote unquote given, but this is all done on lend-lease. So the United States lends Ukraine the weapons to use in the conflict with Russia. And then at some point, and this hasn't been worked out yet or made public, Ukraine has to pay back the United States on the money and missiles or weapons lent to them. It took Great Britain till last year to pay off World War II. That was 35 billion. Okay, so Ukraine is almost double that now. So the question is, at what point will they be able to pay that back? And what happens in the negotiations down the road? So that will be interesting to develop. But if there are any ideas that we can come up with on the lend leasing, how to partake and get some of the interest, we'll show those to you. In adding on to that, you have a defense school major who has written a paper or given comments out to the local Swedish press discussing Swedish military preparedness, lack of equipment, and communication issues that would prevent Sweden from really acting defensively here. So the short-term best for Europe would be to see a peace negotiation between Ukraine and Russia, a re-stabilization of the gas flows back to Europe so that we don't have to go and violate the ESG goals of using coal or the oil. We could actually start using the Russian gas again, but this is very far away from the table at this point, unless Putin is exercising a strategy of brinkmanship, because he has added that he would be willing to use nuclear. We saw those comments coming out again last night. So the European economy will continue to suffer. We will probably see continued contraction. We already saw that in countries like France, where the gas production and electricity production caused a contraction of production of goods in France. And I believe that was 2.3%. That was back in August. So energy continues to be the main driver for our economy. Of course, it has a correlation of 1 to the market, so that's nothing new. But the relevance for us in our monetary policy will become increasingly painful for the European economy. And when you look at this, you already see people starting to say, well, Norway is making too much money, because Norway provides 40% of the needs for Great Britain and 25% of the needs for the EU in terms of gas production. One of the main companies to look at there is called Equinor. They're majority owned, or there is a large ownership stake by the Norwegian government. So this is well known within trading circles, this company Equinor, but this is one to look at if you want to understand more about the gas pipelines into Europe and how Europe is providing gas from within the EU. We also see that the energy developments, Uniper is now 98.5% held by the German government. Uniper is a company that had holdings in Russia and Ukraine, now also continues to have holdings in Sweden. They don't really have those other holdings, and the German government had to come in and take it over. Most interesting about this is that Uniper owns positions in Ringholm, which is one of our nuclear reactors, and in position in Oskarshamn as well, and nuclear power there, alongside Fortum, which is one of our large Swedish energy electricity producers. So the irony here is Germany's been closing down reactors. Now they're buying a company that has invested in reactors in Sweden. Sweden had been on a path of closing down reactors. We don't have our new government in place yet, but our new government strongly favors building new reactors and decreasing the reliance on the fossil fuels and achieving the emission targets that the country has by using nuclear. We still don't have the full development there, but it looks more positive for us. But the influence of the Germans on our nuclear power will be interesting as that develops. Now, many would say that their small ownership stakes will not influence, but I think it's worth noting. And then part of the climate goals, we do have, there's an energy factory that's being built in a town that's not too far away from one of our smaller, larger towns. All towns are small in Sweden if you compare them to China, but in a little town called Mariehamn, very beautiful place, very nice to go to. There's an energy factory that was going to be built with investment from Volvo Cars. You would see the battery production for companies like Polestar. Unfortunately, due to our Environmental Species Act, or Endangered Species Act and protection of endangered species, this product or project may be stopped. And it's 3 salamanders that would be impacted negatively and may stop the entire project. And oddly enough, there's 3,000 new jobs that would be created by this battery production facility. So again, our energy issues are the real focus for the economy. You're seeing a growth of the funds that are offering energy products. And therefore, I would mention as well, so most of these, as because we're here in Europe and Sweden, they're all going to be ESG, and they're going to have their SDG, and they're going to have the UN goals to achieve the climate goals. There is a company in the United States called Strive, and they're focusing on the oil and gas that are doing oil and gas exploration and production. And while I think it's important that we take care of the planet and we do a better job than we have, meaning like don't put bad chemicals into the water or dump toxic issues into the water, this one, you're already doing it, and people have been ignoring this and are willing to use it. Where Strive is going forward on this, they're getting a lot of attraction and momentum in the US. And so it's an interesting thing to look at, especially when you go through Shell, which has large ESG goals and recently replaced the CEO and chairman, and looking at where they're spending in their balance sheet on oil and gas exploration to get a real view of what their target is for profitability. So things to take a look at, Bjorn Lomborg, of course. Things to also take a look at would be the energy policy goals and energy investments and what the energy companies are doing on their investment cycle for the company and achieve profitability. So I think we still have a negative trip for the market right now. We're still out in rocky seas. The Fed's going to give their comments. We'll see what the ECB does afterwards. And the dollar, by the way, I didn't mention that. We should mention the dollar. Dollar continues to climb. We'll see how it reacts after tonight's action from the Fed. This will give some of the higher rates in the world. And we've seen the Chinese yuan reacting to this already. And so we have a lot on our plate. A lot of it's negative. We'll try to find some of the better ideas for you. But right now, everything still continues to look negative, and maybe best place is on the sidelines. Okay, so thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.